What is going on, Illuminaires? Back at it, Barber with Beauty and the Barber, another deck profile. Today we have the deck profile that I'm using today is from a local win yesterday. There was about 24 people. I took first place. It was only league, so there was only 3 rounds. Technically, if it was a real tournament, there should have been one more round. But this is Jafar Wheel and my take on Jafar Wheel, and I just want to give an explanation on why I chose certain cards and certain lines of play, and why people I think are not playing the deck correctly. And shout out to my boy Dylan and a couple of my other Jafar guys out there. Also shout out to the Discord. If you haven't heard yet, we have a Discord for all our fellow Jafar lovers of the deck, and I've had a lot of fun with this deck. There's a lot of cool things the deck can do. I think people are leaning too far on the Jafar win con, and there's just more of the more the deck wants to do. So let's just get into it. So just to start off, we got 4 Robin Hoods. 4 Robin Hoods, it's probably your turn 1 play no matter what. Especially if you're on the play, you want to just throw out a card. Every card in this deck to me says, hey, I'm going to play a card, and if you don't deal with it, then my game state's just going to get better and better as time goes on. So they had to deal with every single card you play, in my opinion, outside of a few cards. Some cards are just made for control, and that's why I think this deck's a mid-range control deck. You can lean towards being aggressive some games, and you can lean being more control some games, which is why I think the deck actually is viable in a tournament. So, but Robin Hood Shift, he's a 2/2 quest for 1, and he just enables your shift guy to go over him. So he's just the turn 1 play, and if you need to, you can quest with him early. You can trade with like things that only have one attack on them, and just be able to. Even if you don't have the shift, you can use him to kind of control the board if you need to. But the next card I play is more so for the control, so we'll put him over there. But this guy's for the control. If you go second, you want to play this guy most times, because if you can play him, then sorry, let me get this all a little more organized. If you can play Captain Hook, then you know that you're also trying to say, all right, hey, I'm going to defend whatever you're going to attack with. So if you turn a card sideways, Captain Hook will trade with it no matter what, and that's his job. He's just a 1 challenger +2. Everybody kind of knows what this card does. He's basically a 3/2 when he attacks. Now into our 2-drops. I only run 2 2-drops, and everything in this deck kind of has like a purpose. The Blue Fairy is one of the best cards in this deck. It is a 1/1 evasive, but when you play a Floodborn, you're able to draw cards. So this enables our draw engine to be live, and most of the time you want to play her on turn 2. It's a pretty good curve. You can drop her. Not many things for evasive hate in this format. I took this deck because I saw a lot of green popping up, and I think green struggles with decks that can quest early or have some sort of win con that can get around their discard. But Blue Fairy just says I'm enabling a draw engine, and she can quest. This girl can quest all game if they can't deal with her, and be able to put in a lot of lore. And if you have 2 on board or 3 on board, you're drawing for each fairy trigger. So if you play Jafar 4, let's say, and you got 3 fairies on 4, you're gonna draw 3 for that. So the draw engine's pretty good. A lot of people don't value removing it either, so it usually sticks around. So it's just the solid 4 of. I wouldn't go any less on the card. Following up with our other 2-drop, we have a Smee. Smee is the other kind of control piece to Captain Hook. He can also be very aggressive, which is why I like the card. He can tilt one way or the other. If you want to use him just to kind of stalemate people and say, hey, if you want to turn your card sideways, I'll trade with you no matter what, because Captain Hook plus Smee, I'll be able to do some things. And also, if you have Captain Hook plus Smee and you're going aggressive, Smee is not going to take damage on himself. So he basically keeps himself alive. Very good card. One of the best 2-drops in the game. Quest for 2. Can't complain. 3/3 shield. Not much more to say about Smeeze. Just a great card. And if Hook's not on the board, he does damage himself, which really doesn't matter because honestly, most of the time you're either just questing with him to get ahead, or you're using him just to kind of say, hey, if you turn your card sideways, it's going to die. So now we just get one 3-drop character. It's Maleficent. I had a hard time finding a slot for this. Shout out my boy Dylan. He plays Tinkerbell in this slot. I think Tinkerbell's pretty good. She kind of does the same thing, but for me as a card player that I want to draw cards consistently. So this girl just guarantees that I'm going to draw a card, and if anything, that's not bad for a turn 3. So I'm either using her to draw a card on turn 3 or usually hard casting friends turn 3 to draw 2. Sometimes if you just stick her, you can get friends on the other, on the crackback if they don't get rid of it. Card is just a staple for purple. If I could play more, I would, but at this point in the game, like, we're just trying to tech in so many things for different decks that Maleficent's kind of just one of the weaker cards of the deck. But to follow up the draw engine, I like to keep the deck drawing consistently. We got 3 Rabbit. Rabbit is the card that says I'm drawing a card on play, I'm drawing a card on leave. So a lot of things in the format is destroy your targets. So a lot of people are going to try to just kill anything that you play. And this deck ultimately says kill everything that I play every single turn, which is pretty cool. You feel kind of aggressive at some points, but you also feel like you're in control some points. But yeah, everybody knows what the Rabbit does. It's a 2/3. I wish it hit more. It would be really good if it was a 3/3, but they had to make it balanced. So Rabbit's just a nice 3-of. But now we get into more of the Floodborn packages. And this is where the deck really starts to shine. This is where if you have your fairies on board, all these cards become a Rabbit. Essentially, they all become Maleficent. They all draw cards. So we have the first Floodborn is the 4-drop Jafar. He can shift. I don't have a target for him to shift over. I used to play the evasive, but I just think drawing cards and keeping my hand more consistent was better for my play style. And the fact he's a 3/4 is pretty good. So early game, you're able to kind of control the board, especially if you have Robin Hood and him out. If you go Robin Hood 3, him 4, and you got Fairy, you're just able to have a draw engine that controls the board, and you're able to sing songs with these guys, and the deck can get out of hand really quickly. And if people don't know what they're up against, then it can sneak up on people very fast. The cool part about this guy is when you attack a card and kill it in your turn, then he can draw a card. So you're able to use him to not only control the board, but also keep your draw engine consistent and keep filtering in your hand, keep drawing cards. As you can tell, I like to draw cards. It's one of my natures in card games. I like to draw a lot. I like to have a lot of resources. So the follow-up to the Jafar is going to be your Beast. You want 4 Beast. Beast is the card that says, if you don't answer me, I'm going to essentially outdraw you, no matter what deck you are. Unless they whole new world you, and even then, if they don't get rid of Beast, you're going to draw 2 more. It's just one of those cards that it has to be answered. It's another card that says, if you don't answer me indefinitely, I'm going to definitely have a higher resource value than you. I'm going to develop a board state more consistently. I'll have everything I usually need to see with this card if you don't get rid of it. So Beast is just amazing. The guy draws off the fairy, so you get a draw and play if he's played. And if you have 2, you have more than 1 draw. And then when you start your turn, if he's got no damage, he draws an additional card. And most people seek to get rid of this card the quickest, which also is a good thing for the deck because people say Beast is bad, but he also baits out the best removal spells. So he's a double-edged sword. He's good because in the control matches he's going to bait out your best removal, and he might not stick, but that enables you to get Jafar online and able to get that combo to go and win essentially what you have to win in the control matches, because otherwise You just can't. So Beast, 4 of, I wouldn't go any less. The next 5-drop line we play is the Robin Hood Shift, obviously. This card, it's a $40 card for a reason, guys. This card is, you shift on 3. Usually you go Robin Hood, Blue Fairy, shift on 3. You draw a card off of it. Then during your turn, whenever he banishes a card, you gain 2 lore. So he's going to develop lore on his own by controlling the board. This is a mid-range control deck. By controlling the board. And he's going to draw a card when he's banished in a challenge. So as long as you're using him efficiently, you're going to gain lore no matter what and draw a card when he's done. And if your opponent decides to get rid of him without using like a spell or an effect, then you're just gonna draw a card no matter what. The guy is insane. Early game, you want to get him down, and then even later game, you can just keep playing him, draw cards if the fairy's out, and then if they don't deal with him, he's gonna keep controlling their board. Later game, he's not as effective, but still, like early game, if you get him off, he's the bee's knees. This is the 6-drop line I play, 3 Tinkerbell, and 1 other one, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Tinkerbell is the answer to your aggro match. Your decks that want to play small things and go wide. And Tinkerbell just says, I'm going to just take care of all of that and not have to worry about anything. And that's why I see where Dylan comes in with the shift. Because if you can shift it early and sing swords, you basically have board state control. But in my opinion, that leaves you with so little in hand at that turn that you're going to be top decking your next answer. So I feel like the deck wants to go a little more long game and control, but you want to win in the mid range. Like you don't want to go as long as the control decks, because the control decks will outpace you. Like you have to win with Jafar in a lot of those matches. But yeah, Tinkerbell comes down. As long as Fairy's on a board, you draw off of it. That's why I love the Fairy. Like every card in this deck becomes a draw, which as a player like me, just that turns a smile on my face. And when she comes in, she can damage everybody for 1. And being a 4/5, she's pretty tanky. She can still get taken out by Zeus. She can't get hit by Medusa, which is nice. She's a quest for 2, so she's still useful if there's nothing on their board. But when there's something sideways, they fear this card. If they don't really want to turn their card sideways, if they can't get rid of this, because she's going to be able to deal damage to the entire board. So if I play her, I deal damage to the entire board, and then I can swing into things and deal damage to other things. And I've also considered playing this 7-drop Simba because he's got that on-play effect where you can either draw 2 and discard 2, or deal 2 damage to things. And I really do like that effect. I really like the effect of just pinging things, especially on-play effects. But the only reason I think I'm playing her over, something like that, A, it's a Floodborn, B, she's a board wipe, and C, it's just going with the engine. But I think Simba's a slept-on card. I think that 7-drop's pretty good, and he's being a 5/7 is really hard to get rid of. The next 6-drop I play is Yzma. Yzma being a Floodborn, you also draw. She basically gives you more draw, so if you head Jafar out, you can get even more lore off her. If you have Rabbit out and you put her out, she can put the Rabbit back to draw 3, which is a pretty cool trick. If the Fairy's on board, then you draw 4. If you have 2 Fairies on board, you draw 5, etc. She's not the greatest card in the deck. She's good for especially cards where you just can't answer, like Tamatoa, Cinderella 5, or Cinderella 7, stuff like that are just too big that you can't hit with Zeus. That's why you want Yzma in the deck. And also because you can just consistently draw off of it on your own end as well. So you don't play any shifts, you just play her out for 6. A lot of these cards, I don't really play the shifts outside the Robin Hood just because the deck gets to the turn it needs to. Now the last character we are playing Jafar deck, so we gotta play Jafar. 4 copies of Jafar, wouldn't go any less. This card is the one that wins the games most of the time. He is the biggest threat in the game, I think. The fact that he can win the game on his own is pretty cool. And the fact that he caters himself with the whole new world and it's themed is cool. But yeah, Jafar, everybody knows what he does. Evasive, 4/5. He can quest for 1 lore, but his big effect is when when it's your turn, while he's exerted, you gain a lore when you draw a card. So everything in this deck draws a card. We play the Whole New World that can gain 7. If you have the double Whole New World, that's usually just game. And this card is just a lot of fun. I know a lot of people struggled at the beginning of the set, including myself, finding the right build for this deck. But over time, we've learned how to kind of feel this deck out and build it to adjust towards the meta. And I think this is one of those decks that, much like purple red, you can just adjust it to your meta, and which is really honestly why I like the deck. I think it's a lot of fun. I don't think it's tier 1. I think it's about tier 1.5. It struggles a lot into Steel Song. It struggles a lot into blue red. But even so, it's one of those decks that you can say, all right, I'll take a couple cards out here. I'll put in these cards and tech it for this match. According to my locals, if they're playing this, and that. So my locals, they play a lot of green, and they play a lot of red, purple, and they play a lot of red, blue. So they play all the meta decks at my locals. And I said, what's a good deck that I can play? And mostly green. A lot of people at my locals, they play green. What's a good deck that I can play that gets around green, but I can still have fun and cater to my playstyle? And I stumbled upon this, and I think Jafar is just a pretty well-rounded deck. It takes a very good pilot to figure out how to in and out this deck correctly. And I have a lot of games with this deck. I have over 100. It's one of those decks that you really want to get your hands dirty with before you take it to a tournament. I played red purple for the longest time just because I was competing. But now that the competition's over, I can ease my stresses a little bit and play something a little more fun, and that's why I'm picking this deck up. And I'm finding that it definitely shocks me every time I play it. Every time I play this deck, I feel like it's a lot stronger than I anticipated it to be. So that being said, let's get into the cards that actually are not characters, and there's quite a few of them. This deck plays a lot of control. It plays a lot of I'm gonna try to do what I want to do, but stop my opponent from stopping me from what I want to do. So let's just get into it. I run 2 Fire Your Cannons. This card has honestly overperformed for me. It's one of those cards I don't think I would go higher than a 2 count, but when I need it, it's there. It's one of those cards that against green early game is very good. You can ping off their Merfolk, you can ping off their Flynn, you can ping off whatever you need early game against an aggro deck. But also late game, Maui, I took out 3 Mauis with the Fire the Cannons yesterday. 3 Mauis. Because they'll swing into other things, damage their Maui, put their Maui from, 5 shield to 2. And you're just open to say, okay, fire your cannons, get rid of your Maui, play this, and that. And for 1, it's not a bad play. I know Dylan plays Kaboom, and I know everybody has their own play style. 2 is not bad either. I think Baboom is also another great option, but I just like the fact that Fire Your Cannons is 1, and for my current meta and what I see at locals, this is what's going to help me the most. And pinging 2 damage just to any target at any point, even a beast at some point. Say your opponent plays a beast. All right, I'll just ping him so they can't draw. There's a lot of good things that you can do with this card. So let's get into the next one. Let's go into 4 Friends. I wouldn't cut this card at all. A lot of people, they say I'm only running 3 to Friends. Friends is the card that draws me the most consistently. If I have a character on board that can sing it, cool, it's free, but I can also hardcast it to draw 2. In a card game, it's never bad to draw cards as long as it's netting me resources. And the fact that it's a song and it can be sung for free and you gain lore off of Jafar and it just adds the consistency and the layers of what the deck wants to do, I wouldn't cut it any shorter than 4. It's staple. This card's staple for all Amethyst decks. It's how you draw cards. So my next 3 drop, Smash, we run 3 Smash is just amazing. This card, in so many situations, it just gets me out of their setup plays where, like yesterday against Green Steel, it can kill an Ursula. If you play against Steel Song, it can kill an Ariel. If you play against Red Purple, it can kill ultimately anything early game. If you play against the mirror match, you can kill their, certain cards. You can kill Minnie Mouse Evasive. I killed a bunch of Minnie Mouse Evasives with this card. Actually, that's probably the card I killed the most with this, was Ursula and Minnie Mouse Evasives. Because I played 1 Green Steel deck and 2 Red Purples last night. And it just puts in work. It's never a bad card. It's a set 1 card. Staple for Steel until we get something better. Now, the other Steel card I run for item removal and location removal, you have to run Rise of the Titans. If you're not running this card, God help you. Some locations are just too strong, and if you don't have the answer to them, Benja's not enough. So this card is just Benja and a banish location in one card. Sure, it doesn't play a guy that quests, but I have plenty of other strategies to quest with, and I think there's just not enough room to include Benja. And that being said, it would just be one of those cards that it's needed. It's a meta call, but it's needed. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, I have red, purple, I have blue, red, I have green, steel, green, purple. They all run, these crazy locations, the castles and the McDuck Manors and all these things, where if I just can't get rid of them, they just win. So this card is never going to leave my deck, especially with seeing all the locations coming up and how crazy they're getting. 3 is a little costly, but until we get something better, like I said, like Smash, we got to play this. I played 3 Along Came Zeus. Arguably, if there's more room in the deck, I'd probably play 4. The card is so strong. Not only can you do it for free, but you can also just hardcast it if you need to. Damaging 5 to anything, being a location or a character, is really, really good. Nothing more to say about this card. Along Came Zeus. 2 Castle. Castle is the card that can recover the lost lore in a stalemate game. So if you got people who are playing Control and we're both just sitting doing nothing, then the thing I would say about that match is how am I gonna crawl back? So you're gonna use the Castle. Castle also can give you more draw if it sticks around. Castle won me actually 2 or 3 of my games last night just because they couldn't deal with it. And then one game I just dropped double Castle and they couldn't deal with it. So they just scooped. There's nothing really more to say about the card. The card is very, very strong. Going with the last of the removal, we got Grab Your Sword. I think this card's okay. It's needed for what the meta is right now. I wish we had a better board wipe spell for Steel, because red getting Be Prepared and having all the different ways to just remove cards has just been like a little overwhelming in comparison, but it still does its job. It's still there for what it needs, and there's decks out there that you can ultimately just grab your swords against and auto win. But for me, the card's just okay. I think it's good, it's needed, but it's just okay. It's one of the weaker cards of the deck, if you ask me. It's needed for certain things, but I wish we had a better board wipe. Last 4 cards of the deck. Whole New World. This is the card that wins the game usually. Whole New World is one of those cards that arguably will be banned one day. And when you combo it with Jafar, gaining 7 uninteractively is just insane. And the fact that you can't really do anything just says, well, I lose. And there was a lot of moments yesterday where my opponents, they just puzzled their way into looking at their hand and realized they couldn't get rid of my Jafar. or like they saw the setup and they knew I had the whole new world. Like a lot of the green decks, like they'll see your hand and they'll know you got like one or two whole new worlds because they can't take everything. If they try to take everything, then their game state doesn't go as well as planned. So if they take your friends, that's fine. I really don't care. But if they take your Zeus's, okay, that means that they're gonna have cards that stick around, and I can whole new world. There's just a lot of ways that you can get around all the deck strategies, and that's why I think the deck's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's tier 1, it's about tier 1.5 from what I felt. But it's still good enough to bring your locals. It's still good enough to have fun. It's still good enough to bring to a tournament if you want. I think, me personally, I'm a control player in tournaments, so I just like to feel safe. But this deck is definitely one of those things where if you master it, you can be very, very good with it. And a lot of my games, so round 1, for example, I played against Steel Emerald. And most of my games came down to a stalemate. And I think that's what people aren't realizing with this deck is that when you are playing against certain decks, you need to know what you're getting into. And a lot of the decks right now are just saying, hey, I'm going to try to quest and do what I want to do while you try to control me. Well, this deck basically says, like, I'm going to set up threats that if you don't deal with me, you're not going to be able to win, and I'm going to have a better win con. So the green decks, I noticed they didn't want to turn their cards sideways unless they absolutely had to, or if they were in a position that was comfortable for them. Where then I can just wait around for Tinkerbell or Grab Your Swords and be able to take care of everything in one shot, which is why I like Steel, because you can get rid of green cards way earlier. Now in my second match, I played red purple, and Castle and a lot of cards that you just bait out like all their plays. So they're playing Rafiki turn 1, they're playing Snake turn 2, they're playing Minnie Mouse turn 3, they're playing Castle turn 4. You have answers to all that. So as long as you follow up and either go aggressive and play the play line that they have to follow you, even if you're on the draw, because I lost every single dice roll last night except one. So even when you are on the draw, it's one of those things where it's like I can play the game state and control what you do. And then even at that point, when they're out of resources, usually you're gonna be still drawing cards as long as you have Blue Fairy on the board. So in red purple, you just want to play. It depends on going first or second, but you want to either be really aggressive or really control. And that's why I think this deck is a high curve, because a lot of people don't understand the matches. If you don't understand the match, then you're just going to falter. If you turn your card sideways at the wrong moment, you're going to lose. So I want to tell people that there's a lot of situations that you have to understand where you are in the game. You have to understand what your opponent might be able to do. You have to understand what resources they already used, and the deck can perform. My last match was also against red purple, and it seemed like Castle did a lot of work in both those matches, to where they wanted to play Castle, but I played Castle, and as long as you play it at the right spot, if they don't have the Maui and all that other stuff, you can watch them ink their targets. So like you'd be like, okay, they inked a Maui, they inked another Maui. Okay, now they only have 2 Mauis in the deck. What's the odds that the 3 cards in their hand might be another Maui? And even if they had the Maui, they have to have the Medusa to get rid of my beast. And there's just so many targets in this deck that if they don't get rid of, that's the goal. So when you do play this deck, don't go in thinking like, I'm going to go fast into Jafar. I'm going to go Jafar turn 5, whole new world. That is the dream. Sure, if you get Robin Hood Fairy, Robin Hood Shift, and then you get a Jafar and a Jafar Shift, and you have the whole new world, and you draw into another one. Sure, that's the dream. But it's not always realistic. So keep in mind when you play this deck, that is not the only approach you need to go. You need to understand the deck has so many lines of play. And that's why I think it takes a skilled player to play this. So I just want to thank everybody again for sticking around. I know it's been kind of a long deck profile. I really wanted to get in depth about it because I think people are playing the deck wrong. And I think it's a good deck. And I think it's a very fun deck. And Jafar is a very fun character and a very fun card. So if you got time to try this deck out, either on Pixelborn, take it to your locals, shoot, even if you got a tournament and you're willing to risk it, take it to a tournament. The deck will be a lot of fun. It'll do things. It'll surprise you. It's gonna work. It's gonna perform. And that's it, guys. Thanks for joining me. This is Barber with Beauty and the Barber, and we're out.